Psalm 35 is where we're going to start off with. Again, we're going to be doing Psalm 35, 36, and 37. And we're not going to actually touch on every verse. I'm just going to give you a cursory view, a brief synopsis of each chapter, share with you the structure, the outline of the chapter, touch on some significant verses, and share a brief takeaway. That is one of the main thoughts, one of the main lessons from each of these psalms. So again, as we go into Psalm 35, I like to call, or I refer to this particular psalm as the May They Psalm. The May They Psalm. And when we look at it, and when you look at the first verse and then just kind of glance through the whole thing, one of the things that should stand out in your mind, or one of the things that you should be able to recognize, is that this is a petitional psalm. That is, it is a prayer. So the entire psalm, David is talking to God. But it's not just any petitional psalm. It also falls into the category of, and you went way too far, go back. See, you don't want folks, again, reading stuff while you're talking about one thing, because then they won't be listening to what you're saying. But anyway, not only is it a petitional psalm, it is also a imprecatory psalm. That is, he is asking God to beat up on some people. So again, the imprecatory psalms is where David is mad at somebody, and he is sicking God on them. And so again, this is not one of those nice prayers. Again, it is a prayer where he is invoking evil. He is asking God to punish somebody. So that's the first thing that you need to recognize about this particular psalm. Now, one of the unique parts of this psalm is, and this is where we get the title from, one of the unique things about this psalm is that the concept of let, L-E-T, let them, that concept is found 19 times in this particular psalm. And again, it's probably a record. 19 times David appeals, God, let something happen. That word let, some translations render it as may this happen or may that happen. Hence the may they psalm. May they fall and skin their knees. May they fall and bump their heads. So again, he appeals to God that certain things, and not necessarily good things, but certain things would happen to the wicked. And on the other hand, that some good things will happen to the righteous. So 19 times the concept of let them or let they or may they is found. Now I say the concept because when you look at the original language, the Hebrew language, the word let actually is not there. But it is built into the grammatical structure of the language. And so as you read through it, again, you'll kind of see, many of the times where, again, they're kind of in groups. Oftentimes, you will find one verse with two lets. And periodically, there will be one verse with three lets. So a quick example, verse 4. Let them be confounded and put to shame. And then after the semicolon, let them be turned back. Verse 5, let them be as chaff. And then the second part, and let the angel of the Lord. So again, you see where in those verses, let, again, there's a twofold let. And then later on, you're going to find a verse where there's actually three lets. And then that's going to be repeated further on down the lines. But so when you count them all up, again, 19 of those lets. Now, when we look, and keep in mind, with the poetry, again, there are possible different alternatives when it comes to outline. And so, again, the outline that I choose for this particular psalm is now on the overhead. And it's broken down into three parts. Psalm 35, verses 1 through 10. David is focusing on it. His focus is those who fight against him and persecute him. So in verses 1 through 10, it's about those who fight against and those who persecute David. And in response, he's going to ask God to do some certain things to those who are actively fighting against him or persecuting him. The second part is verses 11 through 18. And so when you go back and read this, you kind of see where, again, things actually there's some systematic order to what David is talking about. So verses 11 through 18, he deals with those who slander and mock him. Again, so verses 11, slander and mock David. And then verses 19 through 28, those who plot and, if you will, scheme against David. And of course, again, each one is somewhat different. It's different when someone is talking about you as opposed to when they are attacking you, physically attacking you. And of course, you should handle those two situations differently. And you're going to find that David appeals to God to deal with those. Again, he's going to ask that God would deal with them differently. Again, don't deal with the person who's just talking about me and mocking me the same way that you would deal with those who are actively fighting against me and persecuting me and trying to do me physical harm. On the other hand, those who just simply sitting back, making plots and plans and schemes, you don't have to deal with them the same way as those who are mocking me. Again, especially if we can stop the plan before it's been implemented. And so, again, he's going to deal with each group differently. And so as we look at those three subsections, the first subsection is broken down into three parts as well. And so verses 1, 2, and 3, you will see David's petitioning God to defend him. Lord, I got some people fighting against me. I need you to defend me. And so, again, you have the different images. And so, again, the defense is one would defend in the midst of battle. Hence, verse 2, take up the shield and the buckler. Verse 3, draw out your spear. Again, David is basically saying, I got some people waging war against me. God, I need you to wage war against them. And so verses 1, 2, and 3, he appeals to God to defend him. Again, David's petition for God's defense. Verse 4 through 8, he prays for retribution. Now, I got these folks, they are fighting against me. I got these folks, they are attacking me. I got these people trying to do physical harm. Now, here's what I need you to do to them. And so he prays for retribution. And, of course, you can look at it on your own in terms of what he's asking God to do to these individuals. In verse 9 and 10, he promises God, if you do this, I'm going to be so happy. I'm going to be filled with joy, and I'm going to rejoice. And so, again, he promises to rejoice in God's victory. And so verse 9 and 10, as my soul shall be joyful in the Lord, it shall rejoice in his salvation. Again, these people are attacking me. I'm in a battle. I'm in a losing battle. I need you to come and defend me. Again, when you come and defend me and I get the victory through you, again, my soul shall be joyful in the Lord. It shall rejoice in his salvation. Verse 10, all my bones shall say, Lord, who is like thee, which deliverest the poor from him that is too strong for him. Yea, the poor and the needy from him that spoileth. So David promises, when you come and rescue me, when you come and save me, when you've defended me, again, I'm just going to be filled with so much joy. I'm going to rejoice, and I'm going to, again, just talk about, again, what a great deliverer you are. So that's the first part of that particular psalm. The second part, where he deals with those who slander and mock him. Again, that's verses 11 through 18. And that part is also divided into three parts. Verse 11 through 16, he describes the deeds of his adversaries, the deeds of those who are against him. And so we're not going to go through it. Again, you can just kind of look at it. But, he starts off in verse 11, false witnesses did rise up. They laid charges against things that I knew not. And so while the first part, there was the image of David on the battlefield, the second part is the image of David in court. And so now we got all these false witnesses laying these false charges and these claims against me. And even more so, again, they're mocking me as well. And so he describes their deeds in verses 11 through 16. In verse 17, his appeal for God's help is very simple. Verse 17 is simply, this is what I need you to do. This is how I need you to handle these folks. Verse 17, Lord, how long wilt thou look on? Rescue my soul from their destruction, my darling, which is in reference to his life, my darling from the lions. And so he likened these people who talk about him, who slander him, who mock him as lions that tear at their prey. And his request is very simple: save my soul, save my life from these folks. And so beyond that, he doesn't tell God, he is more specific in terms of what he wants him to do. It's none of this, knock their teeth out, give them a black eye. Again, he just asks for the deliverance. The third part, just like in the first part of the outline, the third part of the second section, David promises to do something. And so in the next verse, verse 18, there's the promise. Lord, if you defend me in court, if you stand as my advocate, if you stand as my lawyer to handle these false charges, I'm going to praise you publicly, is what David is now saying. So the first time he's saying that I'm going to just be filled with so much joy, and I'm going to rejoice, again, if you do this, if you help me from this situation. Now he's saying, I'm going to publicly praise you for your deliverance. And so you're going to see that in verse 18. I will give thanks in the great congregation. This is not something I'm going to do in the privacy of my room. It's not something I'm going to do in my prayer closet. I'm going to publicly give thanks to you, and I will praise thee among much people. There is a time when personal praise and personal gratitude and personal thanksgiving is appropriate. But there's another time when we need to go public with our expression of gratitude. Sometimes our thanksgiving needs to be done in a public arena. And that's where, again, the congregation or the assembly of the saints come in at. The third part of the psalm is also broken into three parts. So the third part is those who plot, those who scheme against David, those who plan evil or conspire to do evil against him. And that's in verses 19 through the end of the chapter, verse 28. And here again, it is broken down into three parts. Verse 19 through 21. He describes the practices of those he describes as his enemies. So these are the things that these people are doing. My enemies, this is what they're doing. So he describes the practices of his enemies in verses 19, 20, and 21. Then in verses 22 through 27, he makes a request for God's vindication. He appeals to God to vindicate him. And so he starts off in verse 22. Thou hast seen, O Lord, keep not silent. O Lord, be not far from me. Stir thyself up and awake to my judgment, even to my cause, my God and my Lord. Those terms, judgment, my cause, again, those are legal terms. Those are terms that would be peculiar to a trial. And so David is on trial, and so he wants God to rise up and to vindicate him. So by vindication, we're no longer talking about defense. We're talking about show me to be innocent. Prove my innocence. And prove my innocence. So again, the first time was simply, again, protect my life. Then, again, had to do with delivering from the slander and so forth. And now it's a matter of proving him to be innocent. Okay, and so as he continues, again, that goes on through verse 27. And in we'll do verse 25, 26, and 27. You can kind of see those. Verse 25, may they not say in their hearts. King James says, let them not say in their hearts. So would we have it. Let them not say. Again, we'll swallow up. So there's a duo. There's a twofold let them. Verse 26, let them be ashamed and brought to confusion together that rejoice at my hurt. Let them be clothed with shame and dishonor that magnify themselves against me. So again, those are his appeal to God in terms of those who are against him. But then he also knows, truth of the matter is, everybody who goes to court is not against you. There are some folks, they go to court because they're on your side. And so he addresses that group in verse 27. Verse 27. And here in verse 27, there's a threefold may they. Verse 27, let them shout for joy and be glad that favor my righteous cause. Yea, let them, there's the second, let them say continually, let the Lord be magnified. And so again, the final let, again, has to do with the Lord. Let the Lord be magnified, which has pleasure in the prosperity of his servant. And so David, he appeals to God to vindicate him, but he doesn't just stop there. Again, don't just show me to be innocent. Those who know I'm innocent and those who are on my side, I want you to even, again, fill them with joy through my declaration of innocence, or through the judgment of innocence. And if you do that, then there's the promise. David's promise in verse 28, and he promises to declare God's righteousness. God always does the right thing. And so, verse 28, my tongue shall speak of thy righteousness and of thy praise all the day long. So if you deliver me from, again, those who are waging war against me, again, I'm going to sing about your salvation. Again, if you save me from those who are mocking me, again, I'm going to praise you about your deliverance. Again, show me to be innocent when I'm brought to judgment, and I will, again, declare your praise. So you have those three parts that did that in Psalm 35. He talks about the problems he's having with people. He appeals to God, what he wants God to do. And finally, his promise response to God. Now, one of the interesting things in this passage, and if you look at all three passages or all three outlines, whether now he's talking about those who are waging war against him, those who mock him, those who plan or plot against him, when he prays to God about them, he prays in such a way where he's basically saying that his adversaries will get exactly what they deserve. No more, no less. Again, he prays that his adversaries will get what they deserve. What I take away from this psalm in its fullness is simply this. Listen, as God's people, there's going to be those who don't like you. They're going to fight against you. They're going to wage war against you. They're going to talk about you. They're going to persecute you. They're going to slander you. They'll even lay false charges upon you. And yes, the truth of the matter is we don't like it, and we want to get even. We want to get even. Now, unfortunately, and that's the phraseology, getting even. Unfortunately, when we go about to get even, we really don't want to get even. We want a greater punishment on them than they truly deserve. And so my great takeaway on this is that the righteous, we should not seek what I'm going to call escalating retribution upon our enemies, but rather we should seek justice. Again, we should not seek escalating retribution. And that's usually what we often do. We want escalating retribution. So somebody, hit me once in my mouth, I'm going to pound their face in. That's not getting even. You've gone above and beyond. I recall, in the Godfather, the opening scene of the Godfather, Godfather 1, one of the local merchants comes to Vito Corleone, and he's seeking justice because his daughter went out on a date with Pookie, and because she would not, act like a floozy, Pookie beat her up, and beat up real bad to the point where she ended up in the hospital. The local merchant goes to Vito Corleone. He tells him, I've gone to court, I've gone to the police, and I did not receive justice. I'm coming to you for justice. The Godfather asked the merchant, what do you want me to do? The merchant basically told him, I want you to kill the guy. Vetoed, being a pious man. Without missing a beat, told him, that is not justice. Your daughter is still alive, and you're asking me to kill this guy. That's not justice. And this is the way we are. When we are wrong, when we are harmed, we say we want to get even, but that's not what we truly want. Again, we want to do greater harm. We want to see greater harm come upon the one who wronged us. And so again, what we see here in Psalm 35, David is not asking God to go overboard. He's seeking just justice. And in some cases, he's simply saying, again, the stuff that they was going to do to me, do to them. Again, he's not, there's no escalating retribution here. Again, he's not piling on. Again, that's our great takeaway. However, I do believe that Jesus actually requires more. Again, as the people of God, again, when the righteous are harmed, again, at best, we should seek only justice, not escalating retribution. I think Jesus would actually appeal to us that we seek mercy. That we seek mercy for those individuals as opposed to justice. And why is that? Because when we stand before God, it is not justice that we desire when we stand before God. It is mercy. And I don't care how good of a person you are. When you stand before God, do not ask for justice, ask for mercy. But if we expect God to show mercy on us, we should be willing to show mercy on others. As we move on to Psalm 36. Psalm 36 is the second one that we're going to deal with. And the focus of Psalm 36, as you go to the next slide, Psalm 36, we can use for the topic, God's steadfast love. God's steadfast love. And this particular psalm can be broken down into two outlines. An outline into 4 parts. And verses 1 through 4, David deals with the ways of the wicked. He talks about the ways of the wicked. In verses 5 through 9, he deals with the kindness of God. In verse 10, we have a simple petition by David, David's petition for the righteous. And then the last 2 verses, David's petition for himself. So we can actually do it just in 3 parts. That is, the ways of the wicked, the kindness of God, David's petition. But he breaks the petition up into 2 parts, and the order is really instructive, the order. His petition is for others first, and then for himself secondly. Okay, and as we look into that particular psalm, again, verses 1 through 4, he's going to deal with the ways of the wicked. The transgressions of the wicked saith within my heart that there is no fear of God before his eyes, for he flattereth himself in his own eyes until his iniquity be found to be hateful. The words of his mouth are iniquity and deceit. He hath left off to be wise and to do good. That is, he doesn't, or he has forgotten to be wise, and he's forgotten to do good. Verse 4, he deviseth mischief upon his bed, and setteth himself in a way that is not good. He abhorreth not evil. This individual, he lays awake at night on his bed trying to figure out ways to do wrong. This is the type of person that we're dealing with. Now, 2 of those verses is one of those situations where David packs so much truth into a single phrase. Keep in mind, this is again one of the methods of teaching, or this is one of the objectives of poetry, to pack as much information in as few words as possible. And so as a result, again, as the Holy Spirit uses these guys to put together these poetic forms, there are different ways, different aspects of looking at the same statement, and it is done intentionally. Again, to communicate as much as possible in as few words as possible. And so the first example is verse 1. King James can only render it one way, again, but the implications and the fullness of this verse, it's profound. So verse 1 in King James, and go to the next slide. King James renders verse 1, and also the American Standard Version renders that verse basically, not necessarily the same words, but the same concept. The transgression of the wicked saith within my heart that there is no fear of God before his eyes. And so basically what this is saying is that when I look at the sins and the transgressions of the wicked, again, it is their sins that convince me that they don't believe that there's a God. They don't have to tell me that they don't fear God. I can look at what they do, and I am convinced in the bottom of my heart, based upon what I see in their lives, they don't fear God. Now, have you been in that situation? You see people, and you know they don't fear God. And so, again, that's what's happening. Their sins, you look at their sins, and, again, that's just evidence. They don't have to tell you that they don't fear God. You already know, based upon what you have seen in their transgressions. So that's one of the implications of that Hebrew phrase, but that's not all. Again, there are several layers of truth in that Hebrew phrase. And so the first one is, I look at their sins, and their sins is all the evidence I need that they don't fear God. The second concept in that same Hebrew phrase is found in, next slide, in the New King James. So New King James rendereth an oracle within my heart concerning the transgressions of the wicked. There is no fear of God before their eyes. And so New King James is simply saying this: the Holy Spirit has revealed to me, based on their wickedness, that they don't fear God. The King James and the American Standard, again, basically, it's common sense. You know, again, it's a logical conclusion. You don't need no great revelation, again, to know that this person don't fear the Lord. On the other hand, the other rendering, again, there's a message. I'm receiving a message from the Lord regarding the transgressions of these people. And that message is simply this: they are doing what they do because they don't fear me. You know, King James is that what they're doing is evidence that they don't fear me. Again, New King James, the other implication, the very reason that they're doing what they're doing is that they don't fear me. Well, which one is true? Both are 100% true. There's another implication to that particular phrase, and the next one is what we see in the Bible in Basic English, as well as the Revised Standard Version. Some others render it this way: transgression speaks to the wicked deep in his heart. There is no fear of God before his eyes. And so, again, the other rendering is that a person's sin is even talking to them. It's speaking deep in their heart. You don't have to fear God. You have to be afraid of God. And so, again, their sins is not only speaking to you, it's also telling you, go on with your bad self. Again, you don't have to stand before God. The fourth implication of that comes from the Septuagint, and it says this: the transgressor, that he may sin, says within himself that there is no fear of God before his eyes. And so it's not the sins that's convincing him that there's no God. In order so that he can sin. Again, the transgressor, he tells himself, in order to justify his sinful behavior, he tells himself, there's no God. Do you not know that most atheists are atheists for this very reason? They have decided on a life of sin. And in order to live that life of sin, they have to convince themselves there's no God. And so I don't have to give an account to anybody. Again, this life is all there is. Now I can do as I desire to do. So all of this insight is embodied in one Hebrew phrase. And again, that's why you're going to find multiple renderings of that particular verse. Now, the second verse is almost the same. Go to the second verse, multiple renderings of that second verse. King James says, for he flattereth himself, that wicked person flattereth himself in his own eyes until his iniquity be found to be hateful. So again, no, this person, again, will go down that path, again, one sin after the other, until they get to the point where they begin to hate their sin, or others begin to hate their sin. That's one rendering. The other rendering is from the New King James Version. When he finds out his iniquity and when he hates. So again, he continues to flatter himself until he recognizes his sin, and he recognizes his iniquity, and it results in hatred. Now, that hatred could be hatred towards himself, and this happens quite often. It could be hatred, again, towards others. The NIV renders it this way. Again, that individual, he flatters himself, again, in his own eyes, too much to detect or to hate his or their sins. There's the expectation that they should hate their sins, but because of the increase in sin, they get to the point where they're reprobates. And now, again, they can no longer detect their sins, nor do they ever hate their sins. Now, of course, you can't hate your sin if you can't detect it in the first place. And this is what the practice of sin does. The New Living Translations render it this way. In their blind conceit, they cannot see how wicked they really are. The English Standard Translation. Again, he continues to flatter himself in his own eyes that his iniquity cannot be found out and hated. The Berean Study Bible puts it this way. His eyes are too full of conceit to detect or hate his own sin. The Contemporary English Version puts it this way. They like themselves too much to hate their own sins or even to see them. They like themselves too much to hate their own sins or even to see them. When you couple verse 2 with verse 4 says this, he deviseth mischief upon his bed, he setteth himself in a way that is not good, he abhorreth not evil. He never gets to the point where he is disgusted by evil. He never gets to the point where he loathes evil. He never gets to the point where he hates evil. There is a divine expectation that you hate sin. No, let me make that more clear. There is a divine expectation that you hate your sin. Now listen, there is not a divine expectation that you don't sin. There's actually a divine expectation that you will. There are divine provisions so that you won't. Okay. Again, God has given us everything we need, again, for us to live holy, godly lives. There are divine provisions to keep us from sinning. But there is an expectation that somewhere along the line you will sin. And if any man does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. If we confess our sins, Jesus Christ is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins. So there is the expectation that you will sin. But there is also the expectation, the divine expectation, that you hate your sin. Now, listen, I'm sure if I asked a question, almost every born-again believer in this room would raise their hand. We have all fallen into a situation where, again, we stumbled into sin. Again, we found ourselves falling short of God's expectation. And after a while, after the Lord dealt with us, we got to hate that thing. And it don't matter what it was. We may have mistreated somebody at work. We may have mistreated our spouse. We may have stubbed our toe and the wrong word came out. We may have been so overwhelmed by the problems of the world that we had to find some relaxation, some relief the wrong way. It don't matter what it is. As a Christian, we always get to the point where we hate what we've done. We've despised what we've done. That's a good thing. If after you have sinned and you've become cognizant of your sin, that you hate what you've done, you're in a good spot. Now listen, this is one of the big problems with homosexuals. They do not hate their sins. And again, Look at some of those sinners again. They like themselves too much to hate their own sins or to even see them. And now they put commercials on TV. Commercials for those who are suffering from AIDS. Keep loving what you do, or whatever that craziness is. You are suffering the consequences of sin in your body, and they telling you keep on loving what you're doing and keep on doing what you love. There is a problem. And listen, it's not just homosexuals. There are others, okay? But as a category, again, that's what's wrong with that whole category of sin. Again, you don't find too many people or too many sinners who identify themselves by their sins. They identify by their sins, and they don't recognize the sin, and they don't hate it. You don't find adulterers, boldly coming out the closet, I'm an adulterer. I'm an adulterer. You don't find liars coming out of the closet, I'm a liar. I'm a liar. You don't find that. And you don't find, you used to. See, again, as I said, it's not just homosexuals. I was going to say you don't find born again people who fall into fornication who identify themselves by their sexual sin. Again, we don't get up in church and saying, I'm a fornicator, come to my wedding. We don't do that. Celebrate my fornication with me. And so again, this is the problem that we see. And it's not just with homosexuals, there are others. But that's a huge problem. When you get to the point where you no longer hate your sin, and in your sin, you like yourself so much, again, where you won't even acknowledge that sin. Again, but this chapter is not dealing with that. The focus of the chapter is God's steadfast love. And so in the remaining verses, again, it deals with God's steadfast love. And so in verse 5, 6, 7, and 8, it talks about how God's kindness, God's love, God's mercy, and the word mercy that you will see in verse 5, and the word loving kindness in verse 7, and loving kindness with a hyphen in verse 10, if you're using the King James, it's the same Hebrew word, which is some other translations rendered steadfast love. In fact, the song, those of you who are old, Don Moen came out with the song, Your Steadfast Love. In fact, that was the name of the album, and it's based on this particular passage. And so if you get that song, bring it up, Google it, again, you'll see again where the words are lifted right out of the scriptures. Thy mercy, thy steadfast love extends to the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the clouds. That's the words of the song. Your righteousness is like majestic mountains, and your wisdom is the depths of the sea. So those are the words of the songs, but you see it comes right out of verse 5 and 6. Thy mercy, O Lord, is in the heavens. Thy faithful reaches to the clouds. Thy righteousness is like the great mountains. Thy judgments, or thy wisdom, is like the great deep, the ocean. O Lord, thou preserveth man and beast. Put a pin in that. God preserves man and beast. 7, how excellent is thy loving kindness, O God. Therefore the children of men put their trust under the shadows of thy wings. They shall be abundantly satisfied with the fatness of thy house, and shall make them drink of the rivers of thy pleasures. For with the fountain of light we shall see light. And so he deals with God's steadfast love. God's love, God's kindness is universal. Both man and animals are the recipients of God's mercy. Both animal and men are the recipients of God's love. This becomes abundantly clear if you ever begin to watch these nature shows. And so again, these shows, Planet Earth and these other shows that deals with animals in the wild, or even animals in the domesticated. When you look at those shows with the spiritual eye, it becomes so obvious. God's hand of mercy is even extended to the animals. And yes, in the wilds, again, you'll find, again, predators devouring their prey, and there seems to be a lot of brutality in nature, again, but if you look deep, and notice again how, again, these fawns would escape the lions, and these other helpless animals would escape their prey. And at the same time, these lions, again, that are literally starving to death, every now and then they'll get a meal to sustain them for a couple more weeks. Again, we see where God is preserving even the animals. So yes, his universe, God preserves, he protects, he provides for both man and animal. Now, the next verse makes it very clear that his kindness, his mercy, his love is not just for Israel, but all humanity. Verse 7. How excellent is thy loving kindness, O God. Therefore, the children of men put their trust under the shadows of thy wings. And so all of humanity, again, can be recipients of God's love and his mercy, not just Israel. And then he talks about, again, the benefits of those who put their trust under the shadow of God's wings, whether they are Israelites or whether or not they are Gentiles. The benefits are the same, and that is how it concludes in verse 11 and 12. Let not the foot of pride come against me. Well, in verse 11 and 12, he begins to make his petition to the Lord. Let not the foot of pride come against me, and let not the hand of the wicked remove me. There are the workers of iniquity fallen. They are cast down and shall not be able to rise. The context of there in verse 12 is under the shadows of God's wings. So under the shadows of God's wings, where those individuals put their trust in him, that's where the workers of iniquity are going to find their downfall. So again, they chase, they hunt down their prey like a lion in the wild. But once their prey gets under the shadows of God's wing, again, the wicked, again, their efforts come to naught. The great takeaway in this particular passage, he starts off talking about the ways and the deeds of the wicked and everything that they do and seek to do. And then he talks about God's steadfast love and how, again, when we run under the shadows of God's wing, again, we're safe. And so the great takeaway of this particular psalm is simply this. God's mercy and God's loving kindness is more than enough to undermine the wickedness of sinners. Sinful people, again, their sins will destroy those who are not under God's mercy and under God's love. But regardless of what people may do to you, God's mercy and his loving kindness is enough to undermine anything that they may attempt to do or any problems that may come into your life as a result of their wickedness. Psalms 37. Psalm 37, and this particular psalm I call the Proverbs of David. Because when you read this psalm, that's all it is. It's a collection of proverbs. In fact, this is probably the first example of an individual who compiles their wise sayings. And so Psalms 37, 40 verses, it is done in the form of an acrostic. 2 verses for each letter. It's not a perfect acrostic because there's a couple of letters missing, but again, for each letter in sequential order, there are 2 verses. So it is an acrostic. And so, but it is simply some of David's wisdom that he has accumulated over the years. And he's old now. He's no longer young. Now, how do we know that? Because he said so. I was young once, now I am old, but I've never seen the righteous forsaken or his seed begging bread. And so this is written in the latter part of his life, and he's learned a lot, and he don't want his wisdom to just fall by the wayside, so he writes some of this stuff down, okay? And so what we're going to find now, as you read through this, you're going to find single proverbs as well as couplets. However, in most cases, no, in every case, whenever you see a couplet, the first verse can stand alone. And so what we have here, we have a collection of sentence sermons. Sentence sermons. Each sermon each verse is a sermon all by itself, and for the most part, it can stand alone. Now, again, with the couplets, and of course, there are two ways of looking at the couplets, and some of you all showed how different verses can be linked. But for me, again, the couplet is where one verse cannot stand alone by itself, and it must be attached to the preceding verse. Now, there are some couplets where you can separate the two out, and they can both stand all by themselves, and so they don't need the other one. But again, for me, again, the couplets are those situations where the second verse needs the first verse, lest it be incomplete. And so when I break it down that way, what I see 14 single proverbs. 14 single proverbs, one verse, 14 verses that stand all by themselves. Then I see 13 couplets where the first verse can, in fact, stand all by itself. The first verse don't need the second verse, but the second verse does, need the first verse. Let me show you an example. So verse 1 and 2 would be a couplet. Verse 1, fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity. That can stand all by itself. That's a sermon all by itself. They don't need the second one. Now the second verse, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. You can see how it ties into the first one, and it can't stand by itself. If you just put that one verse on the overhead, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. Again, there's no context there. And so verse 2 needs verse 1, but verse 1 doesn't need verse 2. Another couplet, commit thy ways unto the Lord. Trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. That's it. You can put a period right there and go on. But it's actually connected to 6. And he shall bring forth thy righteousness as the light, and thy judgment as the noonday. 6 needs 5, but 5 don't need 6. Now, some of you all connected 6 and 7, and the truth of the matter is, they are connected. But the difference is that 7 don't need 6. Again, they're connected. Again, verse 6. And he, God, shall bring forth thy righteousness as the light, and thy judgment as the noonday. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself. So again, they're connected. But 7 don't need 6. You can read 7 all by itself, and it's a sermon all in itself. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth the wicked devices to pass. And so again, for me, when I view the couplets, again, the couplets are those verses where they share a continuing thought, but the second verse actually needs the first verse. Some of the other couplets, and we're not going to read it, verse 12 and 13 will be a couplet. Verse 14 and 15 will be a couplet. Verse 18 and 19 is another couplet. 21 and 22 is a couplet. 23 and 24, 25 and 26, 30 and 31, 32 and 33, 35 and 36, 39 and 40. Again, so those would be the couplets where the second verse needs the first verse. Now, even though you have a collection of sentenced sermons, there is a recurring theme. You know how some preachers always like to preach on the same thing? David has the same problem. There are 2 recurring themes in this collection of Proverbs. The first recurring theme, the next slide, is simply this: the wicked will not long endure. That's a recurring theme. And you'll find that same message in verses 1, fret not thyself because of evildoers, for soon they will be cut down like the grass. Again, they're not going to long endure. Verse 9 and 10, again, same thing. The evildoer shall be cut off. They're not going to long endure. Verse 10, for yet a little while and the wicked shall not be. Verse 20, you'll see the same thing. Verse 22, same thing. 28, 35 and 36, you see the same concept. The wicked, they're not going to be around a long time. And same with verse 38. Let's look at their 35 and 36. I have seen the wicked in great power and spread himself like a green bay tree. Yet he passed away, and lo, he was not. Started off strong. Before you know it, he's gone. Again, the wicked will not long endure. Verse 38, but the transgressor shall be destroyed altogether. The end of the wicked shall be cut off. Again, the wicked shall not long endure. Now, there's a second recurring theme. The second recurring theme is simply this, and that is the righteous will inherit the land. The righteous will inherit everything. Bottom line, the righteous will inherit everything. We see that in verse 3. Trust in the Lord and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the land. Again, you're going to end up with the land. Again, verse 9. The evildoers shall be cut off, but those that wait upon the earth, they shall inherit the earth. Again, it seems like the wicked, they get a head start, accumulating a lot of stuff. Again, you're going to be the one that's going to inherit the earth. Verse 11. But the meek shall inherit the earth and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. Jesus didn't come up with that all by himself. Well, okay, yes, he did. Okay, inasmuch as he inspired David to say it, but again, the Sermon on the Mount was not the first time that concept, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. It came out, this is where it came from. Again, but the meek shall inherit the earth and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. That's the blessing. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. We see the same thing in verse 18. The Lord knoweth the days of the upright, and their inheritance shall be forever. 22. For such as be blessed of him shall inherit the earth. Verse 29. The righteous shall inherit the land and dwell therein forever. And verse 34. Wait on the Lord and keep his way, and he shall exalt thee to inherit the land. So again, those are the two recurring themes. The wicked will not long endure. On the other hand, the righteous is going to be around for a long time, and they're going to end up with all the toys. He who dies with all the toys is righteous. Okay, that's the way that one should end up. He who dies with all the toys is righteous. As we continue, now there are some remarkable verses in this passage, and we've talked about some of the remarkable verses. We've kind of shared them. Again, verse 1 was one of them. Verse 4 is another remarkable verse, and that says, delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thy heart. And you got to look at the whole verse. You can't just go around quoting and claiming the second part. The Lord will give you the desires of your heart. Now, that's only if you spend a lot of time with him. That's basically what it's saying. Delight thyself in the Lord. Again, you should find your pleasure in being around God. And if you find your pleasure and your joy and your fulfillment in being around God, you know what? You're going to get everything you want. Now, again, if your pleasure and your desire is something else, you're not going to get it. Continuing, one of the other memorable verses, verse 11. Verse 11, but the meek shall inherit the earth. Again, Jesus makes reference to that. Verse 18, the Lord knoweth the days of the upright, and their inheritance shall be forever. The Lord knoweth the days. Again, every day of your life is known by the Lord. And think about that. Every day of your life. And God knows about it. Continuing, one of the other verses that I find somewhat remarkable. Verse 19, they shall not be ashamed in the evil time, and in the days of famine shall they be satisfied. Did nobody say you won't go through famine? But your needs, again, your needs will be met during hard times. Verse 22, for such as be blessed of him shall inherit the earth, and they that be cursed of him shall be, verse 21. The wicked borroweth and payeth not again, but the righteous showeth mercy and giveth. I'm going to read that a few more times. The wicked borroweth and payeth not again, but the righteous showeth mercy and giveth. And for those of you who still haven't paid me my money, the wicked borroweth and payeth not again. On the other hand, the righteous showeth mercy, and he doesn't just pay back, he gives to others. He gives to others, those who are in need. And the next verse, again, kind of develops that, again, because he does give to others, for such as, that's the type of person, for such as be blessed of him shall inherit the earth. And they that be cursed of him shall be cut off. Again, the individual who gives, again, those who he blesses, again, their blessings will endure. On the other hand, those who he curse, again, they got themselves problems. Verse 37 and 39, to Rick's favorite verse. Mark the perfect man, and behold the upright, for the end of that man is peace. The King James does not fully share what the Lord is trying to say. King James simply puts it this way. As you walk in your integrity, and the word perfect has to do with morally blameless, pious, righteous. Again, we're talking about your lifestyle. And as you walk in your piety, as you walk in your integrity, as you walk in your holiness before the Lord, there are benefits. He says, Mark, observe that individual, the individual that's living a godly life. Observe that individual, and behold the upright, for the end of that man is peace. There's a personal benefit in living holy and righteous. The end of your life is peace. But the Hebrew word that is rendered end also refers to one's posterity, the children, the grandchildren, and the great-grandchildren. And so the fullness of that verse is that observe the perfect man, observe the righteous man, observe the godly man. Not only is his life filled with peace, but the life of his children are also. The life of his grandchildren are also. Your righteousness benefits your descendants. Now, the flip side is true as well. Your sins also greatly impact your descendants. Mariah, some of your peers are suffering hardships and difficulties in their lives because of the sins of their parents. Again, Aaron, some of your peers are struggling in life because of the wickedness and the evil of their parents. Okay. On the other hand, many of your peers in this room, they are living the blessed life because of the righteousness of their parents. Now, I don't know, but the truth of the matter is, if you are suffering because of the sins of your parents, there is refuge under the shadow of God's wings. There is deliverance. And so you have power to undo and undermine, if you will, that curse. Your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents may be the cause of your problem, but there's nothing that they could have done that would force you to stay in that situation. You can come out from under that by fleeing to the Lord and by trusting in Him. And don't waste a lot of time blaming your parents or your grandparents or your great-grandparents for what's going on in your life. On the other hand, if you are living a life of peace, thank God for your parents and thank your parents. But on the other hand, if you are suffering because of the sins of your parents or ancestors, you don't have to stay that way. And as I said, don't waste a lot of time blaming them. Spend a little bit more time considering what are you going to give to your posterity. You can break the cycle. Again, you may be suffering now for something that was not your fault. What are you going to do for your children? And don't say, well, I'm not going to have any children, unless you are content to remain celibate for the rest of your life. And so again, what are you going to provide for your children? And I appeal to you to consider that now. Why? Again, because you need to make up in your mind that you're going to walk in holiness, godliness, and righteousness right now, because your lifestyle and the pattern of your life will impact your posterity for better or for worse. So what is our great takeaway from Psalms 37? 3 great takeaways. Number 1, the wicked, even though they are all around us and they get on our very last nerve, the wicked will be cut off. They will not long endure. Number 2, the righteous will endure and will inherit the land. Number 3, God delivers the righteous from the wicked because the righteous trust in him. The last verse of Psalms 37. The Lord shall help them and deliver them. He shall deliver them from the wicked and save them because they trust in him. God delivers the righteous from the wicked because the righteous have put their trust in him. With our heads.